I close my eyes and I'm like sliding down a tunnel of every color, but not quite any color.
Hey, Tesk, we're kind of like copying each other's swag a little bit today. Gray t-shirt, dad hat.
You got good style, my friend.
You do too, bro. I like it.
I like it.
I like it.
Yo, have y'all heard that house song? I don't know what it actually is, but I heard it at Shambhala, where like the lyrics are, it's this like girl rapping. She's like, I like my snapbacks on backwards and my dad hats on forwards. My mind is gone, but my footwork is flawless. I gotta look that song up because I remember jamming my ass off to that song.
That's
and
bars.
The lyrics are still with me like 10 months later.
That's how you know it's bars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, you still had them memorized. Like, are you sure? You
For real.
All the time?
I mean, it was like a very like pivotal moment. I just like at the amp had just smoked changa for the first time. Nice. And then like once I could see again, stood up and went and danced. And then that song started playing. And so it was like my first word. Changa is like DMT bark. So it's not like you actually smoke the bark instead of smoking the rendered down powder.
Isn't it? I thought it was like toxic to you unless like I thought the whole point of ayahuasca was because the bark itself is toxic, so you have to brew it with whatever else that thing is to like
actually no. So what it is DMT is when you light it on fire and you inhale it, you blast off to the next dimension right away. But if you eat it, we all have this thing called monoamine oxidase, which is a stomach enzyme that immediately denatures and deads DMT. And DMT is in all sorts of stuff. It's in like everything. I think it's in like lettuce and strawberries and all sorts of shit. But when you eat it, it's just like immediately dead. It just doesn't do anything to you. What ayahuasca does is, aside from being like apparently it's a fairly interesting compound just to brew and drink on its own. I don't know. I've never done ayahuasca to this point, but it also contains a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. If you'll see it MAOI.
Okay.
And
that
so
sounds more familiar.
When you brew something with DMT in it and you brew something with an MAOI and then you put them together, then you have orally active DMT. So it's more like, it's like the mushroom version, the mushroom trip when you ate some mushrooms and then it takes a while you come up and then you come back down over 6 hours or whatever, as opposed to you blast off for 5-10 minutes and then come back to reality.
So how does changa differ from DMT if you've smoked like DMT crystal? I smoked.
So it's actually the same person. The person Slow Form introduced me to at the festival that was camping next to her. It's a really cool dude, Andrew. And I met up with Slow Form at AMP, and she was with her neighbor, and like, oh hey, like, hey, you guys want to smoke some changa? I'm like, yes. What is it?
Crack rocks.
And he's like, oh yeah, it's this DMT bark. It's kind of like smoking DMT, but not like quite as intense. It's more like eyes open DMT. It's more like having an acid trip where like you're still seeing the world, but like it's like different. And like, so, I got the first hit off it. And like I didn't really get it lit all the way. I didn't know how fast it was gonna light, and I didn't want to be greedy because there was 4 of us. So I like just kind of lit it, and like my first hit didn't do much. It went around the circle a couple times, and then like after my last hit, I like really held it in because it was like the last hit. And they were like, "Oh, make sure you get the last hit," and blew it out and went whoa. And I closed my eyes and I started seeing the swirls, and I was like, wait, I kind of want to see what the world looks like. And opened my eyes, and we're sitting in the very back of the tent. And somebody walks in front of me like this, and when you've got like 2 mirrors or you're sharing your screen share and it goes to infinity. It was like legs to infinity, just and it was raining out, so everybody's wearing all these colorful ponchos, but for like a full 5 minutes I thought I was actually seeing people's auras because their ponchos were these like these brightly colored see-through geometric shapes around them, and I'm just like, what the fuck is going on? And then after we went and danced to that song I just recited, we went back to this other spot. Evan, like, what was that stage like past the village where they always had the Grove. Yeah, I went back to the Grove, and they had all those like art installations, like the giant light up mushrooms and stuff, and those like benches in the middle. And we sat there, and so there's all these like tree branches and like hanging things with the pine cones attached to them, and then all the light up stuff was behind that, and we smoked it again. And that time, my first hit, like it was already cherried, and I got a couple of hits, and like, you know, when you like you're on acid or mushrooms and you like see like you could see like a sliver of light coming through a couple of branches or something, and you can like stare at it and like it expands and you feel like you're kind of diving into that little ray of light. Yeah, it was like that. I had been like, oh my God, I'm kind of going into some light. And this was like, I could just like look at a little sliver of light and just whoom, like my vision would like dive into it. I feel like I could like zoom my vision, and it all looked so cool. And like, just like turning my head and like waving and vibing like this, like back and forth, just to like make the shapes and the colors move and shit. And like, oh, good times, man. And it was funny because Andrew like is sitting on the far end from me, and he looks down the line, and he's like, everybody, we're all like doing this weird like snake dance together, like all in time. And we're like, yeah, holy shit, we are. And then the next day we went over to their camp. Me and my lady Jen went over to their camp, and they're like, hey, we've got DMT. Do you want to smoke the actual DMT? And that time it was like, instead of all of us doing it together and looking at the world, it was like one person at a time did it. And actually, I think only Jen and I did it because most of the other people had done it already. And like, so I went first and just put it on top of a little bit of weed, and I just took this huge rip of it and faced the whole bowl and just closed my eyes and leaned back in the camp chair and like had this experience. Like, you know, there's always like, you know, the voices that chime up in your head, and the more like anxious you are, it feels like more voices are kind of like trying to, you know, have their little say. And then sometimes, like, if you're like having a bad moment on drugs, it feels like maybe there's like a lot of voices going on and they're all kind of yelling at you. Well, this, like, first I didn't hear any voices at all. And I am just sliding. I close my eyes and I'm like sliding down a tunnel of every color, but not quite any color. And on the sides of the walls, it's like these morphing shapes that almost become recognizable shapes. And my brain can make the connection of what it's about to be, but then it morphs and becomes almost something else. And it's all happening so fast, and it's all flying by me, that it like kind of dawned on me really quickly, a few seconds, like I'm not actually even supposed to be able to hold on to any of this. So I'm just going to let it go and enjoy the ride. And then, like, you know, that was evolving for a while. They had some music playing, so I'm just like, you know, vibing to the music and watching this like whirlwind of colors and almost shapes fly by me. And then at some point I notice that there's this chanting, and all of those voices I was talking about for the first time in my life were all saying everything they were saying in unison, like a big chorus of all the voices of everybody who's ever been ever talking to me, saying the exact same thing. And they were saying above, behind, below, between, like all of the prepositions before, after, you know, all of these, like all the prepositions over and over, and just like all chanting them and chanting them and chanting them. And well, all this like water slide of color is happening. And like that, by this time it's evolved. It's like these two rotating multi-tiered pillars where like that are going like this, and like the shapes are like on them, on the tiers, and like everything behind and around it is like all the colors. And it feels like all the voices are coming from like just out of my field of vision. They're all coming from back here. So like all the sounds back here and all the visuals, all the lights up here. And it's rolling and washing over me. And I'm like thinking, I'm like, oh, it's like all these are prepositions. It's all the things that are heading like to something, but not actually being something. Just like the shapes and the colors are like almost a recognizable shape in the color, but it isn't anything. So it's like interesting how this was like, oh, it's all like, it was all starting to line up. And then once I got that, it started saying yes and, yes and, yes and, like improv comedy. And I was like, okay, interesting. And then it started repeating this one phrase over and over, betwixt, between, B12, B12o, B12o, betwixt, between, B12, B12o, right? What the fuck does that mean? So betwixt,
Right.
between mean the same thing as exactly what I was just thinking, right? And then I started thinking about the other two, B12, B12o, B12, B12o, elbow. It's like an elbow, and elbow is like the preposition of the arm. It's not even like an actual thing. It's where 10 actual things meet up. It's like a party isn't like an actual thing. It's where 10 people or 20 people meet up. And okay, interesting. It's the connection. And then B12.
Like running through your head in real time?
Yeah, like they played like one long song.
Yeah. So like you were hearing these words, making sense of them. As soon as you made sense of them, you heard the next set of words.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah, bro. Like, and like this is a complete, like my girlfriend smoked the DMT right after and had a completely different, apparently like she had one set of words right at the beginning. She thought it was me, but I'm pretty sure I didn't say it. I told her to breathe out eventually because I think she was like still holding it or something, or maybe I told her to hold it, or I don't know what I told her. But then like at some point she's like a little nervous and kind of like holding on, and she hears the voice say, you know, just relax, go with it. And then she did, and then she didn't hear any voices after that, and like just saw like this whole set of visual things that I don't think she was able to describe it as much for me just because it wasn't as concrete of a thing as mine. But to get back to mine, to finish that up, it was like, you know, betwixt, between, B12, B12. So I figured out betwixt, between, and B12, and I'm B12, B12, 12. That's the 12th letter, L. I'm L. Be me. Be myself. Be the connection between people. And like, and then it was like, yes, and. And then that calmest voice that comes up in the back of your head, like the truest one, the one that's not the ego posturing, the one that's not worries, the one that's not afraid, came up, and it was like, all the visuals you ever needed, which made me laugh out loud because I had always like not seen as many crazy visuals on drugs as my friends had when doing mushrooms and acid. And they're like, oh my God, I'm seeing these crazy things over there. And I'm like, I mean, I see the trees and they look way cooler than I've ever seen, but it's still trees and you're not seeing trees at all. That's pretty nuts. I wish I was seeing what you were seeing. And I could always been like low key butthurt that I hadn't seen that kind of visuals. And then like my calmest voice is just laughing its ass off at me while I'm laughing back at it. Like, oh yeah, I can get over the butt hurt. Here's every bit of craziness I could have possibly ever wanted to see on drugs. And I just ignored it all to listen to this message from an ocean of love that was telling me these messages in a code that was basically a big inside joke personally for me, of me being like a word nerd and a lyricist. You know, it was like chanting lyrics at me. And chanting all these, and like, because I'm a word nerd, the fact that it was all prepositions got me thinking, and then it like got more and more specific until I figured out the message. And then there was a couple of other things. Like at that point, the visuals started fading, like somebody was turning down the brightness on it, and the voices started fading away. And at one point, I was like, "Let me."
Did you have your eyes closed this whole time?
Yeah. Completely closed eyes. At one point, I had a thought to open my eyes and see what it looked like, but I quickly dropped that thought because I was already seeing what I was supposed to see. And then like at one point, I remember that same voice. You know, I was like, man, this is crazy. Like, I'm so glad I did this. And like that voice again, the calm voice said, every once in a while. Like, this isn't something you need to like abuse or do all the fucking time, bro. Like, this is a big thing. Just fucking come back every once in a while when you really need this, when it's the right moment, you know, is what I got from that. And then for the first time, as it was fading, and after I had figured it out that it was like B12 was me, then I was like, literally had the conscious thought, let me see if I can do something. And I started thinking Luke motherfucking Rain, because I had pretty much abandoned the Luke Rain. I had just brought Luke Rain back. And then all of a sudden, all the voices were chanting Luke motherfucking Rain. And at the time, I took that to mean like I really needed to make this Luke motherfucking Rain song that I had thought I needed to make. And then I tried to later make that for the Say My Name cipher, and really tried to manipulate the shit out of that song, just like I manipulated the end of the drug trip. And and that taught me a whole lot of lessons about letting my ego die and moving on from that idea of me having to manipulate shit. So it allowed me, it's interesting, like in retrospect, the way I'm looking at it is like it allowed me to manipulate what the voices were saying so that I could have an ego, to build my ego up, to try and really manipulate my music, to get to the point where I realized that overproducing my shit and over manipulating my shit and making it about me was exactly what I don't need to do. And I have to let my ego die as often as possible and really take a better approach of like allowing things. And like, I mean, shit, like that song that I made that I showed you guys yesterday for the music video for the sample pack, like that's like a really cool song. And literally all I did was throw together loops that I had on my computer. It's like, it's all shit I had just made for that sample pack, plus one kick that I had sitting on my computer that I made, and one bass loop that I had sitting on my computer that I made. And it's like a really fucking cool song that I really like. And it took me like part of 2 days to make that song. Like I started it one evening and I finished it the next afternoon. And that song is done and it's good. And I don't have to fuck with it anymore because it's not about me or how hard I work or how much I manipulate it. And so the whole arc of this whole thing has been really big.
That's awesome, man. That sounds like a crazy time. Everybody I've talked to that's done DMT has like, it's always been like drastically different from everybody I've talked to. And they've all said it's been like life changing and like tapped into like certain subconscious things. Imagine next trip, they're like, no, vitamin B12. We need vitamins.
I know, that was my first thought. Like, vitamins? No, but dude,
yeah, right.
I don't know how you piece that together like so well.
The brain is so fucking cool. Like the fact that like everyone seems to have a similar response in which they have some sort of revelation that they have been probably stewing about in their subconscious mind, but hasn't brought to the forefront of themselves. Like, I just think that's so cool. There's so much happening that you don't realize, and that like there's so much like untapped potential of your thought and like thought exercises and stuff that just like normal states of mind and normal like everyday life, like you just never really give yourself the opportunity to tap into those kinds of things. And so like experiences like that just remind you that like, no, that's still the same brain that you have every day. You just like don't access that part, right? Which is just fucking cool. My big takeaway from that whole thing was that I need to go smoke some strawberries and see what happens.
Right. One crazy thing is that like the burning bush that Moses talked to God through is been linked to possibly being the acacia bush, and acacia has DMT in it. So it's like, all right, you're sitting at the mouth of a cave and this bush is on fire and you're breathing the smoke and you talk to her. Yes, I believe you, Moses. You 100% talk to God.
100%. In that time, if you had that experience, you would write a book about it. For fucking
100%.
Sure you would. Like
or at least like chisel some good ideas on some stone tablets so you don't forget them. Like, oh, yo, I cannot forget. Yo, guys, we're not supposed to kill each other or bang each other's wives or steal. So let's not. I'm gonna chisel. I'm gonna chisel and then walk back down the mountain.
And then just leave it to fucking everyday Neanderthal human brain to turn it into some fucking conquest of power rather than the original message, which is like the gist of most religion for me, is that like there's a good message at the center and then some fucking dickhead turns it into a power struggle or a you're right and I'm wrong, or my belief is correct and yours isn't, or like some sort of weird thing that it's not. It's like there's good at the center of all that shit, and instead religion is turned into the biggest force for killing and death that the world has ever seen. It's like, fucking great job, humans. fucking
Yeah.
good job, you know?
My favorite Jesus meme is one who is like, so the message is, you know, be kind and love everybody. And then one of the people standing around says like, oh, but what if they're gay or like have another skin color? He's like, bitch, what did I just say?
Yeah, right?
There's actually pretty solid arguments to suggest that Jesus was probably black or very dark skinned.
Yeah.
And there was actually a very corrupt
He's a Middle Eastern dude, like for sure.
Right.
Not. He
For
did
sure
not
not
look like
white.
me. I look like a Pope's son in the 15th century, vaguely.
So there
Except Cesare Borgia.
exactly. I'm glad you guys know that story.
I like it. What's up, humans? It's Luke, your friendly neighborhood trap Jesus. Thank you so much for watching our videos. We appreciate you. Remember to like and subscribe to our channels. And if you have any questions or topics that we need to cover on the show, put them in the comments. Appreciate you. Peace and peace among worlds.